Turner and Constable were working at a really changeable time in British history, and both really had a commitment to working from nature and landscape. They were contemporaries and often rivals, so that kind of, I think, raised the bar for both of them. I think they're important to me as a trigger for really thinking about how we represent our world and that kind of emotional investment that we make. Obviously now with the acute situation that we're in with climate warming, the fact that, the landscape around us is really shifting and changing due to the effects of that. A place like this, you can see the erosion of the cliff face, and of course that's happened over a geological time frame. But in my own lifetime, this is more rapidly retreating, these cliffs, due to sea level rise and increased storm events. And we can link that with ice sheet melt at the other end of the planet, so Antarctica, the Arctic, the global, across the world, glaciers which are retreating. I think the emotional response one has when one looks at a Turner or a Constable is a really powerful influence over how we actually behave, and that impact is something that has the capacity to make us change behaviour.
I'm drawn towards Constable and have been for many, many years. His paintings to me seem very solid, they seem very made of the same stuff of the earth and of my life. And for that reason, I find him constantly on my shoulder telling me to be not so fanciful, to be not such a Burke, to be not such a sort of artist, really, but to be a person or a thing of the world. I think his work is very human. If I could describe, if Turner's a painter of the air and of the unseen, really, Constable's a painter of the earth and of the very much seen. In fact, so much seen, I think it's probably overlooked. I kind of quite like that. I kind of quite like that your work gets overlooked. I have some sort of affinity with that. I mean, I try to do loads of things in my work, most of which I fail to do, but probably the one thing I've managed to do most of all is evoke a sense of my own personal past, that there's something, that it's a life having lived that's come from somewhere, that there are roots present in the work. And I think that's when I see Constable's work, that's what I get from looking at his paintings more than anything, that there's a life that's been lived, that there is a past. And I think painting, for me, I know the painters would disagree and they would have different reasons for making work, but for me it is a way of holding on, a way of cheating time.
Well, he's one of my heroes, and I admire him greatly. He loved working, and I love working. Well, he was forming a new way of painting, a painter who makes nature a real subject, which it hadn't been before. But this was really looking hard and carefully at nature. Like a lot of later landscape painters, he notes the time of day, the weather, and all these things that make conditions. The landscape painting of earlier times had been behind the Virgin Mary, behind portraits, something you saw through a window, and it was smoothly finished. This painting has a broken colour, broken marks. It's not smooth. And this gives it an immediacy and makes it brings it closer to our own experience of being in the country. I think that making paintings is legitimate. And for goodness sake, do it as well as you can.
He's a quiet shouter. they're very easy paintings with an uneasiness put in. There's a sort of throb or shimmer of something which is uneasy. The darkness that's present in Constable's paintings is a real evidence of the changing face of British society. We have the Enclosures Acts coming in. You know, things aren't as harmonious as they seem in the cornfield. There's a lot of poverty. There's war on the horizon. These things are always in the corners of each painting. We have to remember that.
Constable, he was rooting his work in his familiar local landscape that he'd been brought up in and lived in all his life. For Turner, it's a completely different situation. He was an intrepid traveller. I feel a real affinity to Turner's wanderlust and his impulse to travel and to really look at the dynamics of nature, the way landscape is changing, the drama of that. I think quite often I'm almost following in his footsteps, certainly in the Alps, the French Alps, around Chamonix. I have revisited many of those areas that he would have been painting from. And indeed, you know, in his day, it was a sea of ice. And if you visit that valley now, it's virtually empty. It's of interest to scientists to see these watercolours where Turner has shown where the glacier was back in the early 19th century, because of course that was pre-photography. I mean, the way he represents those glaciers is extraordinary. And I think that's a moment where his work really sort of just is a game changer for landscape. I feel working from landscape now is a really radical subject because it's right in front of me. I've been working now for many decades, sometimes returning to places, and I can see the retreat of a glacier. It's actually within my lifetime. And that kind of witness of something in such a short period of time is something that I think makes me feel a commitment to record that. I love the spontaneity and raw power of Turner's sketchbook drawings. You really get a sense of him being in the elements, out there, working directly from observation. The actual media and the approach to his work is something that's really exciting and kind of unparalleled, I think, from that period. He's literally moving the watercolour around on the page. Quite often, just improvising, I think, using his fingers. You can see that in these cloud studies, or the end of his paintbrush, he's sort of scratching in. He quite often evidently had a sharpened fingernail to scratch out his highlights on the kind of crests of waves, or to remove the media from the watercolour paper. There's just an incredible light and luminosity. He somehow manages with watercolour to achieve a sense of transparency where you can absolutely feel the weather, the light behind a cloud, the reflection on the water.
The sort of abstraction that you get in Turner is so instinctive. The tumultuousness of the paint handling, he was using brushes, I know, but I mean, it looks as though he was using everything, a knife, sort of all churned up. I mean, that's what particularly excites me about the paint, It comes across as felt, apart from just molding the paint, kneading the paint back into this flat surface. I think he, it went through his body. It's a real feeling for paint. Some people have it and some people don't. I was one of the sort of students who visited the Tate gallery every day to see those artists, Turner's particularly, and hearing about his history and water, and me recognizing that, I was drawn naturally to it, because I could see the magic, this turmoil of, beaten up paint color in the work. It attracted me for a long, long time. I go and check him out every now and then. You know, there was something special about the way he went about things.
I think both of them managed to convey a sense of personal, quite idiosyncratic kind of interpretation of landscape, which isn't following any sort of classical genre of landscape that's come before them. It's a new language, and that's so immediate. They speak now to a contemporary audience, I would say, as much as they did to a 19th century audience.